Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Water Online Show Unfiltered. I am Travis Kennedy, the publisher of Water Online, here as always with my esteemed colleague, Nick Browne.
What's up?
Nick, what a day we have.
We have a great day.
This is going to be a wonderful show. We have an amazing guest that's going to be joining us. She's actually already here. I will introduce her in a minute, but I also want to introduce a second co-host here on the show. Many of you may know who she is. She's been in this industry for a long, long time. Well-known, intelligent, and is one of the most influential female voices within water wastewater. Please let me welcome to the show Nadia Abboud, president of the NA Group.
Travis, thanks for having me.
Welcome. I'm excited to have you. Yeah. This is fantastic.
Me too. I'm pumped.
Yes,
finally.
I know, exactly, right? I mean, better late than never, but we are so thankful that you're joining us to help us add some commentary and co-host this episode specifically. This episode that we're going to be talking about a topic that was brought up by one of our users through LinkedIn. And the discussion is going to center around workforce management and then the education of that workforce once they're in the market. So I know that over the course of the past 5, 6, 7, 8, I don't know, Nadia, what do you think? It's been 7, 8 years. We've been talking about the
white tide,
the retirement of the baby boomers as the new generation comes in and starts, or at least tries to take over some of the responsibilities that a lot of those very knowledgeable, experienced workforce engineers and operators had. So, yeah, I have to say that it was about 8, 9 years ago when we started hearing about that, and we're still hearing about it. So the white tide seems to be hanging on for a little while longer. And we certainly would welcome that as a market with all the knowledge that they have and all the history they have. Yeah. We're certainly thankful for that. But one of the best ways to start off this topic is talking specifically about educational opportunities. So related to being able to take people coming into the market as the white wave moves out and being able to educate these millennials, Gen Xers, all of those that are moving into the same role. So I'd like to welcome to the show our subject matter expert, Laura Tegethoff. And Laura, welcome to Water Online show. And we are very blessed and happy you were able to join us to help us make sense of some of these questions that have come through. So welcome to the Water Online show.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
The first question, I'm going to hit you right off the bat. And this is a very open-ended question, and I'm sure you're going to be able to help us out here. But some of our listeners, many of our listeners, would like to hear more about educational opportunities within the water sector, specifically for its workers. So I know it's a very open-ended question, very probably the answer is going to be not short, but we want all the detail you can provide. So
it's actually super long and cut me off when I get too winded. But the reality is right now, workforce development might be the biggest topic that utilities are talking about. There's so many unfulfilled positions in the water and wastewater space. Educational, you asked me about educational opportunities. There's tons of things out there, but the biggest thing that I see as a barrier is young kids, meaning high schoolers, who want to look for an alternative as opposed to going to college, don't really consider the water sector. They don't know enough about the water sector to even consider it. And it's not a linear path to get them into the industry. So the educational opportunities are community colleges. All the associations have courses available. I have an online training company. There's training available there, but there's other distance learning opportunities to get somebody knowledgeable enough to actually have them sit for their most basic license. So, but that's actually not I'd like to say that's the end of it. It's not. Unfortunately,
let's keep going then. Yeah.
You don't get your licensure in most states just by passing the exam. What you have to do is have work on the job training. And so those are called operators in training. And it's an arduous process. And they have to actually do time at a facility. And so what I'm seeing is a lot of the smaller utilities, the older, most experienced superintendents take pride and ownership of their plant, and they don't want to just abandon it. And so they hang on a little too long, and there's not enough budget in most small plants to actually bring on apprentices. So that's our biggest issue. What has to happen is there has to be funding to make sure that our bench gets a little deeper. Okay, that's
those are actually two. So I noticed two in there. So the first one is getting the attention of the younger generation. That could be in high school. That could be just as they get out of high school, but getting them into training courses, either at community college or through online courses or other avenues that gets them up to speed to at least get them their very first certification. I don't know what that. What is
basic
that
water. It's basic water, basic wastewater. It's
okay.
Your Class A, your lowest level. And if you pass that, you would be more eligible to get hired.
Got it.
You demonstrated something.
And
Laura,
where go ahead,
sorry.
Nadia. Go ahead.
Laura, are there any utilities that have a budget or have put any programs into place that have been successful at tackling these issues? And I ask that because I was familiar with someone in Texas, I believe, that they actually take care during that operator and training. They're paying for health insurance, certain incentives that are attractive to the younger generation.
So we're doing something right now we're actually in talks with the state of Ohio. That's my home state. And I always tell people, if I'm not successful in my home state, you shouldn't consider talking to me, because if I was kicked to the curb, it would mean she didn't deliver. But the state of Ohio is actually trying to get a water environmental education program online as an option for high schoolers, as an alternative for their science section of education for their curriculum in high school. And that would get them prepared to actually sit. I do know a lot of utilities. I don't want to shout out, because even the ones that are the most successful still have positions unfulfilled. They can have the most robust OIT program, but a lot of times there's barriers like the civil service exam. Some of the larger cities require a civil service exam, which I'm going to start researching to actually do civil service training. It's an ambiguous thing out there, and I haven't tackled it yet. I was only working on water and wastewater. I didn't know I had to start doing politics.
That's always fun when you dive into politics. Yeah, right. I want to get into the funding in a minute, because you had mentioned how you have superintendents who, like captains of a ship, they'll go down with the ship. Not that the municipality is going down in any way, but they want to hang on as long as they can to make sure that their people, their community, and their plant is running as efficiently and as well as it can. So I want to get to that in a minute. But I just want to stay on the topic of you had mentioned almost as an elective, some high schoolers who are in the state of Ohio. There's some policies being discussed that would give them the opportunity to take a class and start that journey. If you were to give advice to a municipality out there that is having trouble, and it's a lot of them, right, having trouble engaging the younger generations, because knowing that they're going to need to replenish their workforce and perhaps even expand it, what advice would you give those municipalities to say, this is a good guideline and a path you should follow to help attract some of those younger potential workers?
I would end up talking to their school board. There's usually like 17 to 50 high schools in a certain distance. But like in my community, the utility is actually engaging with the school board to talk to the science departments to try to encourage students to enter the workforce. Not everybody I put this on our email, but it's true. Not everybody was supposed to be a supermodel or a pro athlete. You got to start thinking about what are real careers. And, I've been an entrepreneur. I've been in sales. I started off with my basic wastewater license. And, you know, it really has so many tentacles in which you can grow in the water and wastewater industry. I sound like I'm on a soapbox, but it's true. You know, you can start off, and I've seen so many people who had their highest level operator license, and then what they did is they took retirement early and actually got into sales or developed something in the water and wastewater industry that was going to solve a problem, and all of a sudden became an entrepreneur. Or started their own business. It's really amazing what doors this industry and how much we look out for our own to try to make sure that anybody who's a good, hardworking person would find a space in this industry.
It
Laura,
does
what was
seem
your-
like, I'm sorry, go ahead, Nadia.
What was your hook? Like, how did you get into wastewater, and how did it even become, you know, visible to you?
So my dad was in the industry, and he got sick and had to have somebody. He had a rep firm and needed somebody to run his rep firm and knew I was in business. So I started selling back in 1989. I went to my first WEFTEC was in San Francisco, and there was an earthquake. And I want you to know that earthquake solved me from anyone finding out that I knew nothing.
So wait, you were out there when that earthquake hit during the World Series?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Man, man, oh
I
man.
survived.
Yeah.
And I met lifelong friends who we still talk about the 1989 earthquake. But so I started selling, and then I was a rep for 15 years. And then I found that the biggest problem was we're selling equipment, and there's an operation and maintenance manual, 3 hours of training, and good luck, here's the keys to your Ferrari. You know, the equipment is only getting more expensive. And we had to figure out a way of making sure that the equipment was protected, the staff was protected, and there was a transfer of knowledge. So that's how I got into starting my other business.
I mean, but you bring up a really good point, Laura, in the sense that while there's the opportunity with, let's say, policy or working at either state or federal, you know, whether it's national levels, we all live someplace. We all went to school. We all know people. Whether it was just, you know, high school, college, et cetera. So the network that we have, not within the industry, but within our community, is probably the largest opportunity we have to leverage and start building awareness without having to make significant change. I mean, anyone who is joining in with us, it's almost this challenge of, what have you done to talk about what you do in the industry, not to somebody in the industry?
I love that perspective, Nadia, because Tracy Phelps up at Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District is actually doing classes at one of the high schools in Cleveland. And I used to be in the public education sector, and I would go into fifth grade. Fifth grade was the time where we used to go and talk to students. The reality is we should be talking to them in high school. I mean, the fifth graders, all you had to do was say, do you know what happens to when you flush the toilet? People,
everybody loves a poop joke.
Right,
Everybody loves a poop joke.
Yeah.
Fifth grade.
Not quite so much when you're in fifth grade.
No, I imagine they didn't probably think too much about it, but if you said the word poop, you probably had their attention. So, Nick, did you have a question for Laura? Or did you want to bring up anything else? Before I was going to move on to the funding aspect that she brought up.
I was just going to say, you know, it seems like once you get into the water industry, you're a lifer. You know what I mean? It's just,
right.
You get in and you're in. It doesn't matter, you know, what aspect of the industry you're in.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, you're in. You know,
right.
I'm a newbie. You know, I'm not even 3 years into the industry, and I can't even envision going and not being involved in the water industry at this point.
Nadia, any perspective on that?
I agree. I think it's a lobster net. I mean, for me, there's this personal connection to water. I've had the opportunity to grow up in my early childhood in countries that didn't have access to clean drinking water. So when I moved to the United States, I saw the value in that. And for all the serendipitous ways that I got into the industry, I would never leave. I mean, every day I finish my day knowing I've done something good. And while I haven't been able to, let's say, go in and influence younger students in middle school or necessarily in high school, I do a lot of work with my alma mater in the sense of, one, explaining to students that merge between business and engineering and that opportunity to really look at the environmental sector and water. And one of the biggest things is, what I think we come up across is, people talk about the glamour, the appeal, et cetera. There's no definitive brand. And how do you put a brand on just water? It's kind of like got milk, got water. We're all part of building that brand. And we come into this industry, whether we're working for a publisher or an equipment manufacturer or whatever it might be. The reality is we're all part of the brand, building and elevating the brand of water. And there's so many of us, and we have the ability to make a significant impact.
It is interesting. We're the forgotten industry. I mean, the part that I think is interesting is how incredibly valuable water is. We don't have new water. We have to protect the water that we have. And there's water shortages. I mean, you can read, if you pull up your phone, turn on the news, one of the largest cities right now, Mexico City, does not have enough water. That was in the news yesterday. And you look at how precious a commodity this is, and then we realize people pay more for their cable bill, their HBO or cable bill, as opposed to their water bill. So I think it is one of those things. You can't live without water. You can live without cable.
Some might argue, but yeah, I
it depends if you're shut in.
Right, exactly. I agree with all of that in the sense that it seems whether you're a manager of a plant at a treatment facility for a municipality or a young student trying to figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life, there is an increased awareness, at least now, that probably didn't exist to the extent it does now 20, 30 years ago around social responsibility. And,
I agree.
And water is a part of that. I mean, I've said this before on the show, that life expectancy before we found out how to treat water and make it clean and available to people, life expectancy was like in the 30s. And now look what we are. And one of the driving reasons, in addition to, modern medicine, is our ability to deliver clean water. So we are part of something bigger. And when you had mentioned earlier, Laura, that about you have, say, a superintendent at a municipality that just wants to hang on for as long as they can, just not for their own edification and their own glory or anything like that, but to make sure that, right, it's about the community. It's about the people that they serve. It's about their coworkers and the people that answer to them, and making sure the operation goes flawlessly. But you did also mention, and it's true, that there's a lack of availability for understudies, right? How do we bring people in? How does the municipality bring somebody in and get them trained underneath the current superintendent, for instance, or plant manager, for instance? And a lot of that is funding, right?
It's funding, but, there's some policy changes there, with all the infrastructure bills and all the improvements and that we're making at different utilities. One idea that I've heard being kicked around is, if you get one of those low interest or grants, that you have to end up having an OIT added. This is, this person who reached out to you on LinkedIn to ask this question could not be more on point with what's been talked about in the industry. As I said, we have to figure out a solution to this, because each one of these systems is so complicated. If you look, I'm not going to name the utility, but we did a calculation, and one of the utilities, their assets were $2 billion. If we had to figure out how to replace everything at that one utility, it was $2 billion. And that they don't.
One utility? I'm sorry, Laura, that was one municipality?
One utility was $2 billion. Now, that was all their infrastructure.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, those are sewers. And if you
Right.
had to redo it, it would be $2 billion. And they had several it's a large utility. But the reality is, without the people, your plant does not operate. It doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Your assets don't last as long. You incur more risk in your process. There's so many, and you look at it, and it is precarious. So we have to figure out a solution. And so it is your listener was very on point, and it is timely. So
yes, we have very astute listeners. So they certainly understand, but also have questions, and we're glad that you were able to come on air and answer some of those. I would like to give you a chance to talk about what you do specifically there at Water 360 and some of the benefit that you bring to the marketplace. So would you mind letting our listeners know just what is it that you bring to the market? Because I know a lot about it, and it is very beneficial. So go ahead and let everybody know.
So 360 Water started off being an online education system to get contact hours. And the first year into it, I started realizing how to take the operation and maintenance manuals of all these large pieces of equipment and turn them into interactive learning so that we all find startup training very valuable, but it's a one and done. And usually manufacturers don't come back and do a startup service. So there has to be something in place. And it was interesting, back in 2000 when I started 360 Water, I was selling an online training service to people who had dial-ups. So if you want to know about pushing a rock up the hill, that would be a rock up the hill. But anyway, now the biggest thing that I have now seen is the candidates that I'm talking to, or the people who are coming into this industry, all took high school math. And that being said, means that they're adept, and this is an avenue for them to get onboarded. So we've done a couple state programs for certification. And so we have, basic wastewater, basic water, next level water, and then various things that would help somebody pass their licensure. And then we also have a ton of customized operation and maintenance courses on most every manufacturer that markets in the U.S.
Fantastic. I before we let you go, I want to give our engineers, operators, plant managers, superintendents a little bit of foresight and some recommended next steps. So I'm going to ask this open-endedly, but if I was a superintendent or a plant manager at a municipality, and I was curious, what should be the first step that I take to help attract younger generation, or to perhaps even further educate the workforce coming into my system? What would be the very first step I should do?
Sit down and look at your existing staff and figure out who's going to retire in the next 3 or 5 years.
Okay.
And 1 year.
Right. All right. So the odd years.
Odd numbers.
Right.
Odd numbers.
And then from there, once you recognize that, what would be I'm going to have 2 steps. What would be the next step after that?
Next step would figure out how you're going to backfill on the talent that's leaving. And what I usually recommend is, if the person is going to be leaving within the next 3 years, start documenting what their brain trust knows. And the best way is actually to have them write it down, be interviewed, or have them review a document to make the current changes. A lot of documents in utilities, SOPs, SMPs are all outdated. But if you have that experienced operator who's eligible for retirement, get them to review those documents. It's easier to review a document than create one yourself. It's like you talk about publishing. It's hard to start with a blank piece of paper and try to put everything you know down. But if you can review something, it's easier. So start having them review documents and get their input in it.
Excellent. Good roadmap. Thank you very much. This has been very educational, no pun intended. And I'm sure our listeners will appreciate the direction and the knowledge. Laura, really do appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much. And we hope to have you back on the Water Online show very soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Laura.
The Water Online Show is a network of podcasts serving the water and wastewater treatment and engineering communities, delivering the latest in industry news, regulatory guidance, technology solutions, and management best practices. Produced by Water Online, the industry's premier information resource, the Water Online Show pods feature entertaining conversations with thought leaders, decision makers, and innovators, helping you stay on top of your profession and better protect the world's most precious resource. Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode.